Hi you guys, Rachel here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for joining me for another weekly YouTube video. You guys know if you've been here before that you send in the questions and I just answer them from my heart. If you don't know who I am, I would love for you, first let me just say thanks for watching this video. If you don't know who I am, I'm glad you're here. And I always invite those that are new to my channel to subscribe, to like it, to comment, and to go even further by checking out my website, which is themodernshaman.net. There's a ton of resources there, and if you are truly interested in really diving into developing your sacred intuitive gifts, I would love to teach you, to mentor you. I have my masterclass on there, as well as the Lightworker or the Spiritual Entrepreneur program for those that want to take their gifts and share it with humanity. I also just have information on there about my actual sessions, my work. This is my full-time job. And so if you would like to meet with me for a session for healing work, sacred ceremony work, or traditional seership, past life, future probabilities, any of those things, it's all on the website. Again, themodernshaman.net. Okay, let's get on with it. Here's the question for this week. She says, "Hi Rachel, I have been noticing over the last 5 years in my healing journey that the better of a person I become, the more I attract the polar opposite of me when it comes to romantic relationships. Is this normal? I'm prepared to never hurt another man again because they are not what I need them to be. Just want to be sure this is the direction." So the only question in there is this normal? And right off the bat, the first thing I can say about that is there is no norm. There really isn't. We adhere to certain cultural groupings and dynamics because of the functionality of living within culture, or living within a family, or living within a work dynamic. But the more you get to know individuals, the more you realize there's no one that is the same as any other person. We're just all completely unique. Our stories are unique. The way we react to something is unique. The way we think about things. Like, people are fascinating, and there is absolutely no norm. I don't know why our society loves to lump and categorize people into groupings, maybe because they're easier to market to. But basically, just don't put that on yourself. Don't compare yourself to a norm, because there really isn't a norm. There may be shared experiences in life, and that's a beautiful kind of coalescing or resonance of experience. But even two people in the same moment, in the same event, are going to perceive it and storytell it in two different ways. They will remember it differently. So even someone that may be going through a very, very similar experience to you is going to have a unique outcome. And so don't compare yourself to others in that way, or don't judge the comparison. Maybe you can compare in a sense of unity and oneness. But in a sense of judgment, or going like, is this normal? Does this happen to everyone? There's no norm. No. We may have shared experiences, and I can talk on that. So my first piece of advice, or kind of speaking on this, would be to say that in the spiritual evolutionary path, right, when you're on your spiritual journey and you're ascending and you're doing your work and you're truly sincere about growing in your connection to God and source, the universe, whatever you call, and the magnificence of the beyond and that just infinite intelligence, anytime you are growing in that, you are going to have a time period where you put it into practice. And oftentimes when we are going through extreme healing, like you mentioned, you said for the past 5 years, you've been going through a healing journey. I know that I can share from my own personal experience that in my first marriage, when it got very difficult at the end, I got very, very sincere about my spiritual practice. I was just like on my knees in humility and dedication to figuring out, working out, doing everything I could on myself, right? Just to be the absolute best I could be. And I was just up at 3 a.m. every morning and meditating for hours and hours. I was a little bit crazy fanatical about it. But I was so sincere in my dedication to that, and it profoundly changed me and grew me. But here's what happens when you are growing in this spiritual realm, right? Everything happens first in that thought realm, that etheric realm, that spiritual realm, and then it filters down like coffee, percolating down into our three-dimensional experience. It has to take hold and foundation in our life. And this is where we walk the walk. And this is what people oftentimes call the testing ground, where they say, okay, yeah, you're growing, you're learning all of this spiritual knowledge and this esoteric growth, and you're really connecting with your divine self, you're healing yourself. Now go out and do it, right? Now go out and show in your regular relationships, in the hard relationships, in the gritty relationships where there's energetic friction, right? Where your vibration and their vibration are not on the same wavelength. This is where what's often called the testing ground, where it really sets the foundation for that experiential knowledge. Okay, it's one thing to know it all in your head or in your spiritual meditation or visualization. You got it and you're high vibing and you're all good as long as you stay in the cave away from society, right? It's much harder to put it into practice in our regular waking life. And relationships are the number one thing on this earth that we learn about the divine, that we grow ourselves. This is where it becomes truth. It becomes real to me. I know it because I lived it, right? And so this is the fertile ground. But oftentimes, I don't like that term as like it's a test. Okay, so don't get tripped up on that. That used to trip me up. Like, God doesn't test people. I don't think it's testing. I just think it's the natural way of bringing it into a solidified material realm. And this is where you want the relationships to change, right? This is where you want all of this spiritual practice and evolutionary journey to take root. It has to ground down. This is the grounding. It has to move through every one of those chakras and hit that root chakra and ground into materialization on this earth, in your life, in the dynamic here. Otherwise, it doesn't actually have effect on your life and those around you. It just has vibrational effect, but not material effect. And this is where we get the discrepancy by those who are high vibing up in this spiritual realm, as long as they're doing yoga or on their own or at some spiritual retreat. But then they get in their family dynamic at the holidays, or they get in their relationship, or they have somebody trip them up in some little primal way. And it's like, it's all, the nails come out and, and you're back to square one. This is where the true evolution of our soul takes place. This is why we come to earth. This is part of our human evolutionary journey. Like, this is the holy ground, not just up here. It's here in the mud. So that is good that it's being asked of you to put it into practice, okay? And don't miss that part of it. Right? My second piece of advice would be to remember that there is infinite intelligence behind those relationship foibles or learning, or it's not a mistake, okay? When people come into your life and you're in romantic relationships with them, intimate relationships of the heart, there is a soul development there. Don't miss it by putting it all on them and being like, it was all their fault and they were messed up and da-da-da. Nope. There is energetic contribution from you, and there is energetic contribution from them, right? There is a melding of points here, and it is way beyond any language of like blame, or it's not about that. It's going deeper into yourself. And if you've been practicing your own healing journey, then this is the next step, is to go into that place inside of your sovereign being that says, what is in this for me? What am I needing to see? What am I needing to hear from spirit? What is this person teaching me? What am I learning? How am I growing? All of those deeper questions within your sovereign soul of why that relationship was a valid experience for you. And it was. There's no redundancy in the universe. This is a unique experience, and that person had something to bring to you. So honor that in the holiness. If you can get to that place, it's a very holy place of the wisdom in suffering, of the wisdom in difficulty and pain in life. These are very refined growth points. They're very refined, energetic subtleties to our growth and our evolution as a soul, right? And learning to express love in the multitude of ways and learning to learn wisdom in a multitude of ways. So that would be my little second piece of advice, is moving into that space of what can I learn here? What can I glean here? Yeah. And I also, when I look at your question, the third thing that comes up for me is that statement that you made. It's not really a question, but you said, the more, wait, here it is. Basically that you've been on your healing journey, and the better I become, the more I attract the polar opposite. That's a powerful statement into the universe. So I would reflect on that, and I would be open to changing that. I encourage you to be open to changing that. And I realize that when we have created sometimes unconscious or subconscious belief patterns like this, because that's been our experience or that's been showing up in our life, and we don't even realize we kind of have this belief pattern, then it's hard to attract anything else. It's like you're setting yourself up for that type of person showing up, and then you're not surprised when they do, and then it reiterates your belief system of, yep, I knew that was going to show up. That always shows up. That's the way life works. No, that's the belief pattern that you have put into existence, as if you dropped that rock in a lake and you created those ripples with that belief pattern, and now you're walking forward and those ripples are hitting you like waves of people showing up in that exact belief pattern that you created. So we got to change that pattern. And I'm not saying this in judgment, because I have totally been there. Really, I can give an example of this from my personal experience. When I had a lot of negative experiences with men showing up in my life that were disappointing me, and I would have this expectation and they would disappoint me. And I was just like, oh, if I want anything done, I need to do it myself. I shouldn't ask a man, or they're not going to show up as a father. They're not going to show up as a da-da-da. Women could do it better. And in my head, I was reiterating this subconsciously because of my experience in the way that men showed up. And then I started creating that in the future, like almost expecting that that's just how men are. Right? And I didn't even realize I had that belief pattern until I started getting into some deep kind of shadow work before, and really wanting to heal my relationship components before I wanted to bring anybody else in my life or around my children. And so I saw that I had that belief pattern. Well, it was actually so deeply embedded in there after, 15, 16 years in a marriage for a long, when you've had that belief pattern for a long time, sometimes it gets so ingrained in our subconscious layering that it just starts to sabotage or play out those ripples without us consciously realizing it in our actions. This is why sometimes childhood trauma or childhood belief patterns can be sabotaging or hard to identify. This is why shadow work, or really going back and seeing and asking yourself probing questions of what is that belief pattern? What is an underlying thought that seems to speak every time I meet someone, like seems to show up and go, yep, this is what I expected. Yep, this is what I expected. So the question to interrogate is like, what are those expectations that you're essentially putting out first and foremost, even though they may be subconscious in their layering? And it was too hard for me to really switch that into its opposition, to just automatically set an affirmative statement and start saying like, I believe men are great and they show up and they're equal in the relationship dynamic. I didn't believe it. I hadn't had that experience. And so to me, I couldn't latch on to that vibrationally. So what I learned to do was to train myself towards openness. okay? And this shifted the belief to being this rock hard block in my sacrum, right? Where my sacral chakra was held. It changed it from being that blockage to kind of softening it. And so some of the language that I would use and speak to myself was, I'm open to being surprised by a man who really shows up in life and is very responsible. I'm open to not knowing what may show up and learning from them how they handle responsibilities. I am willing to be shown otherwise. These kind of soft openings that were true. And so I believed them. And so that's enough, because you have to be able to fully resonate with an affirmative statement. That's the difference between affirmations that feel like you can't latch onto them, right? To speak them into the universe. They have no resonance with your own soul. You have to find something you believe that's true for you. So just opening, and I would encourage you to just start with some opening statements that you believe that, that you're open to meeting someone who has balance in a relationship, or has a lot to contribute from their own spiritual experience, or is working on their own healing journey in equivalency to yours. You know that there's people out there like that, and you're open to the fact that you could meet them. So there's this open space. And then eventually that openness, what happens is you begin to set that as if you've dropped a rock in the water, in the soup of our experience, and the ripples start going out that speak, I am open to seeing, I'm open. And then you start to see people like this. And they may not be people you're even interested in a relationship yet, but they start to create a new belief pattern of like, yeah, that dude is super responsible. He is showing up for his wife. Or, man, this person really has it together in their healing journey, and I can tell they're working on themselves. So even if it doesn't directly move straight into a romantic relationship, it essentially starts creating a new belief pattern for you and gets looser and easier to move into the affirmative. And eventually you find that you've moved so far from your original belief system that you're able to move directly into, yeah, of course, there's so many fish in the sea that are right where I am spiritually. It's so easy for me to meet someone. It's like, literally, and you start to believe it, like, man, I see him all the time, every day, doing the work. And it just becomes much more accessible to you vibrationally to move and change that dynamic. I hope that that's a helpful practice to you. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. I will say that relationships, kind of this aspect, the very last thing that you say, I'm drawn to right now, where it says, I'm prepared to never hurt another man again because they are not what I need them to be. A relationship dynamic always has its own entity, okay? There's you, there's them. In the partnership, it's like you create your own little baby. And that baby is the relationship. It has its own personality. It has its own likes and dislikes. It has its own morals of what's okay, what's not okay. It has its own boundaries of what type of commitment it is, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. It has what you like doing, what activities you're into. And that entity is always a compromise of the two individuals, okay? Otherwise, it's an autocracy, right? Like a dictatorship or a monarch, right? The king or the queen. And it's an imbalance of energy. And this is a dysfunctional dynamic when it ever gets like that, where it's like one person wears the pants or one person just dominates with their energy. Those are dysfunctional relationships, and they don't survive for the long term because it doesn't support a growth. Instead, one person will do well and the other person is depleted from it. And if you've ever been in those relationship dynamics, you know it. They're not functional. They're not fun to be in. We feel like, man, I'm just contributing everything and I just give and give and give to this relationship, and they just take and take and take. These are dysfunctional dynamics, and when the relationship is not one of compromise. And I don't use that word in a negative way. I realize that sounds like, oh, I'm giving something up. No, it's more like giving, like a gift, okay? I give something to the relationship because I am receiving something in return, right? Just like Christmas coming up, where a lot of people give and they enjoy the energy of giving. They love watching that little kid be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Or just the joy and the delight of somebody receiving something that they thoughtfully gave them. There is such joy and sincerity in that reaction, or in the energetic sharing of those things. The same is true of compromise for the betterment of the entity of the relationship, okay? I keep going like this because I see it like a cell, like it has its own cellular growth. And when it does, say for instance, your partner wants to see a certain movie and you don't really want to see it, but you want to spend time with them and you value the time with them. So you say, all right, that's fine, we'll watch that movie. And you enjoy the cuddling, the companionship, the kind of silly dialogue over the movie. And that becomes your enjoyment, not necessarily the movie itself. So you're receiving from the fact that, like, you didn't hold to the fact that this is not what I like, and this is not me, and I'm not able to be me in this relationship. This is an independence of energy that is not functional in that relating. And so in a way, you're always going to have this energetic blending, and you're going to have to, in some way, contribute, and they're in some way going to have to contribute. And so just kind of being aware in the wisdom of that even as spiritual as you may be this monk or living out this beautiful, but when you are with someone else, their individuality and the creation of what you make together is going to feel like there is a giving of you, a giving up, a giving in, a giving towards, all right? And it does not need to be negative. It is a beautiful creation, right? But this is how, just like our original God source split into individual expressions that are part of our humanity, of everything that we see, right? Of our own little souls. We had to segment off in a bit to create this creation. And so there's aspects that feel like compromise, and that's just the truth of a relationship. It's the truth of interacting with your own children and your own family. And this does not have to be a negative if you value what you're creating together and you're receiving from both sides of that energetic balance. So it can absolutely be a beautiful sense of contribution, where I don't think you need to give up on it all. That last part of like, do I just need to move in this direction? I'm prepared to never hurt another man again. That's fine. You don't need to hurt. But I think it would be a beautiful place to stay open to being surprised, to working on you, and to seeing another that is working and can contribute and give to a relationship dynamic that's something truly beautiful in its own and unique in its own creation that the two of you bring together energetically. So I hope that was a blessing to you. I will be back here next week with another video. Bye, guys.